Well, we have heard it from our government leaders, from some of our police administrators, and we have definitely heard it on social media.
That the protests that have gripped the nation and our valley are being led or derailed by troublemakers who have come here from out of state. Now, that is an allegation that we have been looking into, and tonight, our chief investigative reporter, Morgan Loew, has some insight into who is coordinating all of this. Morgan?
Yeah, Chris and Scene, every time we cover these protests, we hear from people who say this has got to be some highly funded, highly coordinated effort from some out-of-town group. I've even heard that from law enforcement sources. But how do you prove or disprove something like that? One idea is that you look at who has been arrested. The sights and sounds of protest, sometimes violent protest, have filled our streets and made it into our living rooms. If you ask the president who's behind this,
the violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups.
Here is Trump's attorney general.
By anarchic and left extremist groups, far left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence.
Here in the Phoenix area, the protests became violent during the last weekend of May downtown, and in Scottsdale, where there was looting. And our police sources said the real troublemakers were coming in from out of town. So you would think some of them would have been arrested. We looked at 266 people booked into the Maricopa County Jail for offenses including rioting, unlawful assembly, criminal damage, disorderly conduct, and aggravated assault. We found former high school sports stars, young people whose parents were waiting outside the jail for them, pet groomers, lots of regular people, and some with criminal records. Almost every single person arrested is from here or lives here now. We only found a couple of bona fide out-of-towners.
It's very convenient and it's very easy to say, these extremist groups.
Keisha McKinner is with the Anti-Defamation League, which tracks extremists and hate groups. She says the ADL has not found evidence of organized extremist groups on the left or right leading the charge on the ground to protest or disrupt the communities where the protests take place.
And America just has to look at the fact that it is the American people. It is your neighbor, it is your coworker, it is your ally that is out here marching and saying, we have to do something.
Most of the people arrested and booked after the protests here in the Valley were released with no charges filed. Prosecutors have referred 80 cases for misdemeanor charges. Of those 266 people who were arrested, 113 of them were women, 153 of them were men. Some of them did have prior criminal histories, but those seem to be the exception, not the rule. Most of these people had had no brushes with the law at all in the past. Back to you guys.
Morgan, of course, this has been a hot topic for our viewers. They've emailed us on social media. Even some state lawmakers posted about this topic on social media. Again, all of them saying out-of-town extremist groups, they were responsible for the violence that occurred during these protests. But again, according to your report, it doesn't sound like they arrested anyone like that.
Yeah, they might have been out there in some small numbers, but there is no evidence that they were out there at all leading the charge or in large numbers. Otherwise, we would have seen that reflected in the arrest record. As some out-of-town law enforcement leaders have described it this way. They call them the lone wolf type, lone wolf anarchists, lone wolf Antifa types, or lone wolf right militia types. They might be out there sort of in small little groups, but they are not in charge and they're not out there in large numbers.